Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Scooter's World, coming to you live from the Granville Guitar headquarters here in lovely St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm your host, Scooter. I hope everyone is doing well in this crazy 2020 year. Today is October the 19th. It's a Monday. And I've got on the bench here just to look it over a little bit, honestly. I'm going to do an evaluation, maybe do some work on this. This is an amp that I purchased for myself over the weekend over at the wonderful Jimmy's Vintage music store over in Auburndale, Florida. If you don't know of Jimmy's, it's kind of a hike from Tampa or St. Petersburg, where we are now. It's like 80 miles from here, from where I'm standing. Totally worth it. Jimmy is an exceptional guy with wonderful inventory. It was a great hang, lots of friendly people and friendly faces and good conversation, and it was just a lot of fun. I've been doing some, full disclosure, I've been doing some work for Jimmy for a while now, some repair work on some things. And this was the first chance I had to go up and visit his store, and I'm very glad I made the effort. I've had it in my head lately that I want a Deluxe Reverb. And this is what we came up with. It's a 73 Fender Deluxe Reverb. Deluxes are unique amongst Fender amps. I think they may be my favorite Fender amp, and I love me some Fender amps. My Blackface Bandmaster comes perilously close to being my favorite sometimes, but the Deluxe Reverb is just a great, friendly, wonderful, versatile package. Well, you know, every Cheap Trick record that's ever been made is the sound of Rick Nielsen plugging into a Deluxe Reverb and cranking it up all the way. And it's hard for me to argue with that sound because it's a wonderful sound. Anyway, back to this amp. This is a 73 silver face. This would have been during the CBS era. I prefer the silvers myself. The transformers are better, in my opinion. They're more durable. One of the things CBS did when they came on board was to change the way that the transformers were spec'd from being potted with wax to being potted with an epoxy. They didn't change anything else about the process. And what that means is that these last a lot longer. In all the years that I've been doing amp repairs, I've replaced, in Blackface amplifiers overall, I've probably replaced, I'd say close to 100 transformers in my career, maybe more. But as for silvers, I've only ever had to replace one transformer of either power or output in a silver face amp, ever. And that speaks to their durability, which is important. But I also like the sound of them better in general. I mean, obviously, Blackfaces sound fantastic, so... But it's pretty straightforward on the front, as you would expect. Everything's here. This is a really clean example. It had casters on it, which I've already removed. Not a fan of casters on Fender amps directly, even twins. It invites carelessness and problems. If you need wheels on it, get a cart or get a road case and live it in a road case, something of that nature. But I think, first of all, when you go to use a Fender amplifier, it sounds better if it's sitting on the floor. It just does. Let's flip this thing around and have a look at the back real quick here. All right, here we are around back. Again, you can see how clean it is. I may not even have to clean the exterior of this thing at all. It has the original power cord with the red end on it. It's got an eminent speaker in it, as you can see by that 6.7 in the date code. I would have to look up eminent speaker codes as to whether that's an 86 or a 78, how they work their speaker codes. But it's an eminent speaker and not original, clearly. But it sounds really good, so I'm probably going to leave it in place. I have some other 12-inch speakers laying around. I may try in it at some point. I have a couple of Electro Voice Force 12s. One of them may end up in here at some point just for giggles. As we go up here, we can see the caution stickers in place. Always like to see that. to prevent an electric shock, completely ignore this label. Let's see here. Courtesy outlet, which when I'm overhauling these amplifiers, I typically disable. Ground switch, fuse holder, power, standby. That's kind of dark. Let's see if I can get some light on this. There we go. That's better. Let's go back here. Courtesy outlet. And again, look how clean. I mean, this one was babied. It was taken care of. And the price reflected that, but I feel like I got a really good deal over there at Jimmy's. Jimmy's a great guy. That's another question that comes up frequently in my shop. Where can I go in the area to get vintage stuff and good deals on used gear? There's a couple of places. There's a real handful of really good places. Mad Music is not far from my shop over on Central Avenue. Rob's always got interesting pieces in his little shop there, and always has. And he's real good to deal with for used things. I recommend you go check him out. Also, there's St. Pete Guitars, which is Stevie B's new shop down on Clearwater Beach. He has got just an absolute jam-packed little showroom down there full of very cool items. There's also Replay Guitar Exchange over in Tampa. They always have a very nice selection of used gear, both vintage and more recent. So there are shops in the area. If you seek them all out, I recommend you go and check all these out. You don't, the big box stores, as they're called, are fine. Your Sam Ash and your Guitar Center, those are fine stores. But, every once in a while you want to shop a little more vintagey kind of stuff, a little more used stuff, something with a little better vibe or a little different vibe anyway. And, there are shops in the area. I'm sure there are others. These are just the ones that I know about. So if you are in Tampa Bay and you're lamenting not being able to find cool vintage shops, believe me, they're out there. It's worth the trip over to Auburndale to check out Jimmy's Vintage. Nice place. End of sermon. All right, back to this amplifier. Like I said, it's a 73. I've already looked at all the transformers and dated those out. So the transformers are all 73, and I'm confident that that's what we're going to find as we get the chassis out of this thing and have a look at it. So let's do that, shall we? Okay, we're up here looking at the tube complement, and it looks like we got a bunch of old stuff in here. V1, let's have a look at this. This is an RCA 7025, as you can see right there. This is the definitive Fender input tube, in my opinion. I have a drawer full of drool-worthy vintage tubes that I test stuff with all the time. And I mainly have those so that I can see what an amp can sound like or should sound like with those new old stock vintage tubes in it. And that gives me an idea what it sounds like, and then I'll go to the newer tubes and see how they compare, basically. It gives me a baseline comparator, let's call it that. I think this is also a 7025. Yes, it is. RCA 7025. That would likely be what these left the factory with. These might not be the ones that left the factory with it, but these are the correct tubes for that. The 7025 is just it's the prototypical Fender input tube. They just have a big, warm, perfect sound for this amp, in my opinion. I've tried a lot of them, and that's basically what I end up with. Looks like V3 is an old Triad. Let's get up here where I can see it a little better. It's a 7025, unfortunately, which is not correct for the reverb driver tube. This is the Japanese tube. You see them occasionally. This one will have to, that one will have to go away because it's supposed to be a 12AT7, and that one is a 12AX. Moving on here to V3, there's your reverb transformer. Now, the reverb transformer is the only one with an earlier date. That has a 1972 manufacture date on it. Here is V4. And V4 Doesn't have any markings on it. It has a rough, oh yes it does, it's a 7025. Hopefully you can see that there. Yep, another RCA 7025. So that's one of the reasons why I think this amp sounded so good to me. It's got a lot of caps that need to be replaced on the board side, which we'll see here in a minute. Judging by this wafer, this is also a 7025. And it is. Another RCA 7025. Those are wonderful tubes, and I'll probably be leaving them in this amp just because, you know, if they sound good and they're not leaking. Another RCA down here in the V6 position, and that is an RCA 12AT. Could likely be an original tube. That's very possible. Now the power tubes are a bit of a sad note down here, because you've got one RCA and one Sovtek. You know, probably work out okay. I'll have to look at them on the bias meters to see where their idles are and if they can actually be matched up or anything. But yeah, not too. Definitely, these will be going away. I'll be putting a matched pair of JJs in this amp, just because that's what I like in these guys. Now this is a 5U4 GB. Rectifier tube. Let me get it there where the camera can see it. I'll have to look. I think the 5U4 is correct for this era of Deluxe. The earlier black faces used the 5AR4, sometimes also called a GZ34. 1 second, I'm going to look at the tube chart. Blast. The tube chart is missing. That would tell me right away. 5U4, 5AR4, they're going to behave differently. You know, I'll probably stick with the 5U because that's what's called for on the schematic. But that rectifier tube could likely be good. I've seen rectifier tubes be 50, 60 years old and be just fine. So let's look at the transformers here. See if I can zoom on the... That is the reverb transformer right there. And if we zoom in on that thing, I hope you can see that. Well, let me change angles because I can't really read it to you off there. It's 606244. So that's a 72. As we sweep over here to the output transformer, we can see that one, 6063. The choke is right there, also 6063. I haven't looked up the model numbers to make sure they're right, but I'm sure they are. And there's your power transformer, also 6063. So this is a 73. Let's pop open the doghouse and see what we got in there. Well, as we can see, original filter caps. The amp still sounded pretty good. I plugged it in and turned it on and played it for half an hour or so. We're going to swing this thing around and take a look at the other end of these caps, and you will see why they're coming out. Yeah, right there, friends. That is no bueno. No bueno at all. You can see all of this nastiness right here from a blown cap, or at least leaky. It hasn't blown yet. These filter caps will actually work until they actually blow up. But we're not going to wait for that to happen. We're actually going to do the cap job on these now. I won't be able to do it today because, as it happens, I'm fresh out of the capacitors I need to do this with. And since I got 3 Deluxes in here right now, all basically needing the same servicing, that's why I had to reorder the F&T caps that I like to use. So this work will not get done today, but it will get done soon, hopefully. Depends on what other stuff happens in the shop here. Now, this brings up another interesting point. You've got a couple of resistors right here. You got a 10K and 2.2K is right here. Those resistors always should be replaced. Always, always, always. Particularly if they're carbon comps, old ones like these. Everyone worships at the temple and altar of the carbon comp resistor. And there are a variety of reasons why I don't agree with that. First of all, genuine carbon comps are old, and carbon comps will start to deteriorate slightly with age, and have a much shorter useful life once they go into the amplifier. And resistors like these that have been in an amplifier for this many years are going to have not only aged physically, they're going to have aged electrically, seen all kinds of heat and all kinds of issues. So those two guys will be going away along with these caps. Some places would clean this up and try and recharge or reform these caps. I'm not a big fan of that idea. It's kind of like retreading a tire. Just buy a new tire. I mean, really, if you're going to take the responsibility to own the vintage amplifier, then just put some new tires on it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to put new rubber on this thing. Let's flip the chassis over so you can see the interior here. All right, as we can see, this thing is, it's completely original inside. I don't see where anything's ever been changed. Let's start over here by the pilot light on the interior. And we can see the bias supply up in there, which consists of this cap, and this resistor, and that diode right there. That will get redone. I'm going to change all three of those components out. This is an electrolytic cap. If the big filter supply caps are going crazy, it's likely to assume that this one's going to be not far behind. As we come over here to the bias potentiometer, you can see the date on this thing. If you look closely up here, you can see 77. That's 13773. And it's 28th week. So that's a 73 bias pot. So that continues to add more evidence to the actual date of the amplifier. Power transformer right there. There is your the pilot light bayonet and the two resistors for the phantom center tap, which I will probably replace as well. Those get punished a little bit. So I'm not going to just pell-mell go in here and replace a bunch of stuff. However, there are things that get hammered over time and, do not lend themselves to good performance and good tone, and that's the goal here. So you can see all of this originality in the amp. There's your phase inverter, long-tailed pair, you can see it, which is this arrangement of resistors right here. Those are all silver face values. Will I blackface that section? I don't know. Maybe not. I'm not sure. That'll be something I leave to the end of the process and just kind of listen to it. And if it sounds fine with that stuff there, then I'm going to leave it. That's one of the things with a vintage piece. You're buying vintage supposedly to get some of the advantages of that. Now, that is a section of the circuit that does take some punishment, so it's possible I may want to replace those with some carbon films or even metal oxide. That's what I like to use up in there. And then you have your splitter resistors up here, which are already black face values. This is kind of a strange thing. These are black face values. They're not silver face values yet in 73 on this amp anyway. And the amp still has its genuine bias control, and it has you can't see them because they're behind these wires. There's a pair of 220K resistors up here that split the bias to the two power tubes. And those are blackface values up here, silverface, or blackface here, but all of this is silverface. So you can gradually see where CBS was going and what they were changing by looking at things inside this. This is pretty much a time capsule, but it's a transitionary time capsule. It's got some blue caps in, which were still pretty good sounding. They're not as good to my ear as the earlier Mallory molded caps that we all love and adore. However, they're okay. The ones that are the worst are these chalky brown cat turds, as we call them. They're still pretty good. They're still not bad. I've heard them sound really good. Or I've at least had them in really good sounding amplifiers anyway. So, yeah, so coming down here, again, more carbon comps. Now, these two white Mallorys here, those are going to go away, and likely the associated resistors along with them. This is some silverface madness right here. Excuse me. In the black face, there is a bypass cap associated with this resistor right here that they did away with. And it has, excuse me, it has the effect of running the reverb, the front end of the reverb circuit extremely hot. So this part I will blackface. The reverb will sound better, and the components associated with it will last longer. So there's all of that. Now, I'm going to swing the chassis around so you can see the other side of it. Okay, now you can see we are facing the rear of the chassis, and you can see stuff this direction that you couldn't before. Power transformers right there, and we got the area where the cord comes in, the AC cable. I may or may not replace that. It's old and kind of wanky, but it's in really good shape, and it's kind of a shame to change it if it's not necessary, but I probably will, because generally on these amps I will wire around the courtesy outlet. There's the courtesy outlet right there, and there's the ground switch along with death cap down there. Typically I remove all of that wiring, just wire around, leave them in place, but wire around them, and just wire directly to the fuse. That's the way it should be. So I'll probably do that. In these old power cables of this generation, they actually get the copper, excuse me, actually gets corroded inside the sleeve, which is a real bummer, because if you ever have to remake one of those connections, you have to actually burnish that wire. You have to scrape it, and so you can get a good clean solder joint. If you ever go to do that, it can be real frustrating. Okay, here are your power tube sockets, and amongst all of this wire, this thick CBS era wire, which is fine. I'm going to leave most of it, more than likely. You can see these little funny caps here they used for noise suppression. There's one over here. This one's way up high for some reason, and this one's snugged way down tight against this resistor. All that's going away. Those resistors will simply come out. This is a screen grid resistor right here, this 470 ohm carbon comp. That will be going bye-bye. And you can see underneath it right there, 1.5K grid stopper resistor. All of that will go away. It's old. Carbon comps start acting funny when they get older, and particularly in power situations. You want to be done with those. So I'm going to just pull them. Rest of the wiring looks pretty good. I'm going to, just kind of go through the thing and check it all, test it all. Say what you want about the CBS wire, as they call it, this stuff, the multi-stranded wire, versus the single conductor cloth covered stuff. You rarely have to replace this wire. I've had to replace a lot of single conductor wire over the years. This stuff tends to last, quite a while. and can sound fantastic. It just depends on how well it's done. It can look a little messier. It can look a little more spaghetti-like because it's hard to bend it and set it in place and make it all nice and neat. But yeah, there you go. All right, so we've established what's here and what needs to be done. I'm going to do it in probably in layers, replacing the stuff that I think needs to be replaced, and then listen to the amplifier and see what should be replaced at that point. So stay tuned. Okay, work is proceeding here on this 73 Deluxe Reverb. As we can see right here, I have removed at this point the two capacitors and resistors which were connected to ground up here. And the job that those are performing is, the one on the right is the normal channel first preamp cathode and resistor capacitor. And then the one on the left is the vibrato channel first preamp cathode resistor and capacitor, set up in a bypass arrangement. They're in parallel with each other. Okay, that's right here. Now if we come further up the circuit, this is the one that I was mentioning previously right here. There should be another cap in parallel with this one. Now they actually install it at a different point in the amp, but it needs to be right here. So that's going to be changed. Those are the normal and vibrato channel second preamp cathode resistor and cap arrangements. There's an 820 right here on the right, and the original value that's supposed to be there is a 2.2K in parallel with another one of these 25 microfarad at 25 volts right here. So it needs to go there, and this resistor needs to be a different value. And as I was coming down the circuit a bit, we come down here, and there's one completely missing from the circuit. Right here, we have, this one is the reverb recovery cathode and resistor. And then we have a vibrato cathode resistor and capacitor right there. That's supposed to be for recovery, but there's no cap. So from the factory, that did not have this cap. Say hello to CBS years. You know, they were cranking these bad boys out hard and fast. This red wire is way too long. That's coming off the reverb transformer. I'm going to cut that back. That does not need to be that long. You know, the CBS years probably suffered a bit, mostly because they were cranking them out, so many of them. You know, they were having trouble keeping up with it. Oh, looky here. There's a stamp inside the chassis down there I did not see before. There's actually a date stamp in here. You see them sometimes. This one says November 15th, 1973. Let's see if I can get it on the camera here. That's where it is right there. Pull these wires back and you can see it. November 15th, 1973. So that's the definitive answer right there. You can see I've already put the new, let's get some of this stuff out of the way here. I've already put in the new bias supply capacitor. And I went ahead and left the original resistor and diode in place. They're in real good shape. Tested them under voltage. They're working fine. They're nice and clean. I left them alone. And I went ahead and left the phantom center tap resistors alone. They're testing out fine too, so I left those alone. But yeah, this is something weird. More than one missing capacitor from this circuit. So I'm going to take care of that. And I'm going to replace these two here in that vicinity right there. And work continues. All right, here we are. Still continuing work. It's a Monday, so I've had some interruptions, as you can imagine. Taking care of customers and other repairs and such. Okay, if we come down here to the front end of this thingy, there are those bypass caps right there. Those two guys right there, and their associated resistors of the proper values. Once again, right here, normal channel, first preamp cathode, resistor and capacitor. And this one is the vibrato channel, first preamp cathode and resistor. And those have been swapped out. Okay, then we're going to come down here. Make sure I'm in the right place. By the way, those two previous bypass arrangements were 25 microfarad at 25 volt capacitors, bypassing 1.5K resistors. This one down here, make sure I'm pointing at it. Yeah. Okay, those are the normal and vibrato channels, second preamp cathode, resistor, and capacitor. We have the same value of capacitor on each channel. This one here, the resistor there is 820 ohms. And this one is 2.2K, and they're both bypassed, or in parallel if you prefer, to ground with these 25 microfarad at 25 volts. Okay, then the next pair is right down here. See if I can push this cap up out of the way a little bit so you can see it better. Now you'll notice that I went with a carbon comp right here. And that's a 2.7K bypassed with a 25 at 25. And over here we have another 820 ohm bypassed with a 25-25. Why did I go with a carbon comp there? Because that's what I had. I've ordered some, and when they come in I may change that, I may not. It's a new production carbon comp. It's not a vintage carbon comp, so it should probably be okay. What that's doing, that's a gain makeup stage right there is what that is. That's reverb. Actually, wait a second. The reverb recovery is right here on the right. This one is one of the vibrato cathode resistors and capacitors. So that has to do with the tremolo circuit itself. So I'm not sure. I may leave it depending on what it sounds like and what the voltages look like. Okay, then there's one more over here. This one. This is 100K bypassed with a 25 at 50 volts. Now, the original Mallory that was in there was 5 at 50 volts. And this is the black face value, which is 25. So that's what that is. That is the other of the vibrato cathode resistor and capacitors. This bypass arrangement here. Okay, so and for right now, I've left the rest of this alone. Long tail pair is still there. Phase inverter plate resistors that we talked about earlier, the 100K and the 82K, those are fine for now, so I'm going to leave them alone. And then we have the bias splitter resistors, the 220Ks up on top there. I'm going to leave those bad boys alone for now. And yeah, we'll see what it sounds like and what it feels like. I can always change them out later. So I'm kind of, as usual, I like to err on the side of leaving things alone if they're not, you know, heinously out of value. The things I'm replacing right now are things that is just average wear and tear stuff that just needs to be taken care of. So now I'm not sure if we can get a good angle here. I'll just have to lean this forward. So yeah, let's see if this. Oh, I've got a piece of wire that's in there that I forgot to get out. Yeah, I haven't gotten to that stage yet where I'm checking for little flash pieces and all of that. Okay, let's see here. We are looking at the screen grid resistors and also the grid stoppers are down in here, right down in there. And there's your screen grids up here, and same with this power tube. Did that one as well. Cleaned up the filament wires a little bit. Left the wire alone, the one that's blue. Left it alone. There's a couple other weird things in here. I think that this might be a replaced reverb transformer. If you'll notice in the last segment, I was talking about how too long the red wire coming off the reverb transformer, which is right here, it was way too long, and the solder joint was really wanky. Well, all the other solder joints from this little reverb transformer were kind of ignorant as well. So I went after this tube socket here. Whoever had installed it did really bad soldering work here. They managed to rub up against these filament wires a little bit. They don't seem to be shorting, and I've twisted them around so it didn't burn through the insulation, but it's just kind of ugly. I've actually replaced this wire right here because it had multiple burns on it. Anyway, and I've also removed the little cap that was back here on the. I'm gonna have to get down even further where you see where I'm pointing. There was a capacitor, another. Well, let's call it a sloppy work makeup capacitor that used to go here across the reverb transformer stuff, and it's not necessary, so we typically yank them out when we find them. Anyway, that is that pretty much covers it. I do not have the power cable installed yet. I do that last. That way I can flip the chassis over and over and over without having to fumble with the power cord until I'm ready to actually power it up. So I've not installed the new power cord yet, but I soon will. So now we're going to go after those filter caps in the doghouse. Okay, here we are over on the positive side of the filter supply board. You can see the power rails as they exist now in the amplifier. Now I've done a modification to this. I don't always do this to deluxe reverbs because not everybody likes it. This tripod is really messing with me today. Sorry about that. Not everybody likes the firmness of the power supply that I like. Now, I'm not talking about the rectification, that sag that you get from a tube rectifier. I like that. Tube rec is staying. That sag I can live with. But I think that this power supply in the Deluxe Reverb is under-designed, and they still do this to this day. Matter of fact, in the reissues, one of the things I have a problem with is they get rid of these two caps that are on the first node of the power supply, and they substitute that with one capacitor. So typically I like to redo those whenever I have the chance, because they don't put up with the abuse, I don't think. I think that this is a much better arrangement here. Now, what was in here before was a 16 microfarad at, where's the schematic? I'm looking at the schematic. Well, okay, that's not it. That's a non-reverb. There were two 16s at 450. And those were wired in such a way to give you 900 volts. Okay. I like to wire together two 100 microfarad at 350 volts, which gives you a 700 volt, which is plenty. It's ridiculously plenty. But not only that, you'll notice how these leads are kind of bent weird. I like to put bypass resistors on each one in the same manner that you would find in a Fender Twin or a Super Reverb or any of the larger amps. I don't understand why this power supply has to be arranged any differently than the larger amps. It's a weak point on these amps, in my opinion, and it's something that I do on Deluxe Reverbs where we need a little bit, cleaner response at higher volumes. So we've used our friends, the F&T caps here. These are the 22 UFs at 500s for the latter three nodes. We've replaced the two resistors here, the 10K and the 2.2K, with metal oxides. And there are 220K 3-watt metal oxides tucked in underneath in between here to bypass these. What those resistors do is they prevent one cap or the other from seeing the entire brunt of the juice coming into the power supply. It evens out the load between the two large caps. Some of you looking in may decry that and go, "What are you doing, you fool?" I'm going to flip this around so you can see the other side. And there we go. All right, where are we? We're right here. Okay. So again, as you can see, these are bent in such a way to allow the installation of the two resistors in between there. Okay, and what happens is, here's the ground wire that's at the end of this. All right, the hot comes in up here. Okay, goes in through it comes in the ground to the power supply, which is at the very end, comes in here, passes through this cap. This cap, its positive side, is connected down here with a piece of bus wire that's underneath to there. So the node actually comes in here. Ground is here, that's where it ends up. The node actually comes in here, goes to this positive to negative here, and back up to here and down to here. That's why they're a totem pole, but one of them is not reversed. Now, if you look at the power supply board on a Fender Twin, you will see that there's a space devoted to all of this. You'll see that there are little eyelets for the two 220 resistors, and there are wires that go cross forth, one way or the other. So this one's flipped around. So I had to improvise a little bit, and I did. And I've done this a couple of times with a couple of different Deluxe Reverbs, adapted these larger caps like this. In the silver faces in particular, I like it a lot. Does a great job. Again, F&T caps. It's the law here. I've gone back and forth between a number of other brands, but a few brands I've had problems with and tried them for a while and just ended up sticking and staying with the F&Ts for the long term. They seem to work the best for me. So tested all the tubes in this amp. All of them are good except for what was it? The incorrect driver tube for the reverb circuit. Someone had put a 12AX7 in there. It's not bad. I might use it in something else someday. But we're replacing that with a JJAT7. That's the one that's going to go right there next to the reverb transformer. That's the driver tube for the reverb circuit. And so I replaced that with a brand new JJ. And I'm just about ready to install the power cord and charge up the caps. And, going to be pretty much time to call it a day here pretty soon. Have to probably wait till tomorrow to do a little sound demo for you. But stand by, going to put the power cord on. All right, we're back on this thing from yesterday. I've got the power cord in. So you can see this is the way I like to do ground connections for 3-prong grounded AC cables. I don't like the solder blob technique. It's not dependable. I know that's what Fender did back in the day, and you can see a couple other examples in this amplifier that I'm going to leave, but like those two things. One good whack with a screwdriver and a hammer, a big flathead screwdriver and hammer, will pop that thing right off of there. And I'm just not confident in how those joints play out. So this is what I like to do here. You got your nut that that holds on the transformer, and you get a little eyelet and you solder to the eyelet and you just tighten that thing down real good. I've also cleaned the chassis very thoroughly and very carefully right there at that point. I actually get in there with a Dremel tool and a wire brush head on the Dremel tool and clean that chassis really good at that point, and then go over it with isopropyl alcohol to make sure that that connection is very solid and very clean. Now, I'm going to have to shift here a little bit. I've actually got the chassis up on its side, and I'm trying to show how I wire these three-prong cords here. Now you can see, if I can get some light in there. There it is. How's that? How I wire these up is very simple. You want the first thing that the black wire hits to be the fuse. I skip the courtesy outlet. It's still there. There's nothing hooked up to it. And I skip the polarity switch. Again, it's there. Nothing hooked up to it. And the black wire goes directly to the tip of the fuse. Right there. The other side of that fuse is the black wire from the power transformer. Period. Nothing in the way. This way, if anything at all goes wrong in the amplifier, the fuse will blow. That's good, sensible protection in my book. Now, the white wire from the AC cable goes to that far end there of the power switch. And then the white wire from the power transformer goes to the other side of that switch. Let's see here. I'm going to move this filament wire out of the way just a little bit. There, you can see it a little better. So that's how I do AC cables in just about every amplifier. Fenders for sure, but in most every amplifier. Yeah. So the way I've got this thing set up on here now on the bench, it's actually, I have this block of wood that I've made purpose built for this. That's exactly the right thickness, and it's got cork on either side of it, so that I'm actually using the cabinet as something of a stand. And I sometimes use cabinets as amp stands. You just put them face down on the bench and set the chassis up on it, and it usually works pretty good. Now you have to be careful. Usually I will take some paper towels and cover the speaker so that no debris or solder or anything gets down into the speaker while I'm working. But in a pinch, that works pretty good if you don't have a proper stand. This works really well because you just plug the speaker into the amplifier. I've got my bias meter hooked up. And you can take all your readings, and if anything sounds weird or funny, you can actually access the circuit board in its entirety, or the eyelet board rather, in its entirety, and figure out what's going on. So basically, this bad boy is finished. Nothing left now but to set the idle current. I got to charge the caps, of course. I usually spend 3 to 4 hours doing that. That's got to be done. But once that's finished up, we'll set the idle and have a play test. And this thing will be going out into my showroom. More than likely, it'll take over the spot vacated by the Mystery Marvel that used to be out in my front room for people to test guitars on. When they come to pick them up here in the shop, this will be the amp they plug into, more than likely. So, all right, that's it for this little segment. All right, we're all done, basically, here. Caps are charged. Power cable is installed, as we saw before. I did swap out the reverb tank. We'll get to that here in a second. For tubes, we ended up sticking with the original RCA tube rectifier. It works fine. It survived this long and still works really good. Tests out good. I added, you can't really see it, unfortunately. I added a bear claw to that because on these amps, if that rec tube falls out, you can really run into a lot of problems. So that's one thing I like to do to Deluxes in a general, on a general level. Like I said, we changed out the reverb tank, and the reason I did that is the old one was making sound, but you can see the bag there. I've cleaned it up a little bit inside, and we cleaned the Tolex on the exterior some too. Did my standard gentle detailing, as I call it, just to clean it up, but not make it look like some fool grabbed a bottle of Armor All and hosed it down. So that really, yeah. Anyway, so we put a new reverb tank in it. The old one was kind of splashy on the sustain of it. It got real springy and bubbly at the end of it, and that's not a sound I particularly care for in a spring reverb, even though that's kind of what it is. So the tank that I chose is the Jensen Mod reverb tank. I get those from CE Distribution. If you're not a wholesale dealer, I think their retail wing is Antique Electronics Supply. Wonderful people over there, great selection, fast shipping. I don't think they ever closed down during the coronavirus thing. They're in Arizona. And I don't believe they ever had to stop because I've been ordering stuff from them all through this. So anyway, there it is. It's all finished. Let's flip it around so you can see the front. Of course, I still have to put the upper back panel back on. But I'm real pleased with how it turned out. It's exactly what I wanted. I got it in my head recently that I wanted a deluxe reverb, and Jimmy over there at Jimmy's Vintage, he had a couple of them that would have suited the bill very nicely. This one was just too good to pass up. It's the right year. 73 is the year before they started going into the master volume pole boost kind of era, which is no big deal. Everything they did is totally reversible, but you have additional things to the front panel that are hard to reverse. So this one was the last year for the look that I wanted, and yeah. So that's all for this report on my 73 Deluxe Reverb. Thanks once again to Jimmy over at Jimmy's Vintage in Auburndale. Seek them out. Wonderful little store. He's got great inventory that's changing all the time. And he's carrying my pedals now. He has some Granville pedals in stock over there right now. Go check out Jimmy. Do yourself a favor. It's a lot of fun. If you miss music stores the way they used to be, check out Jimmy's. Check out St. Pete Guitars. Check out Mad Music. Check out Replay Guitar Exchange over in Tampa. Those are the ones that I know of. All of them staffed and owned by good people doing a fantastic job. So support your local music stores. That's the end of today's sermon. If you have any questions about anything that we do here at Granville Guitars, seek us out on the web. We're at www.granvilleguitars.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and also the blog over at WordPress, A View from the Granville Bench. That's all I know for today, kids. Be good to one another.